Good morning and welcome to Daniel Weekly 33. Today with my Pearl shirt on. Right. I have the Pearl code on the back. Can you see it? Well, almost. Very old, funny t-shirt I found in the closet. Okay, so we have a packed video today. So I better get going then. I did close the user poll with lots of questions about curl and libcurl, and there were a lot of responses. I told you already last week, 1,475 people responded in total eventually, and kind of a massive feedback. So I'm slowly going through that and trying to analyze, and I'm writing some sort of a report or my thoughts about it into a separate document, and I'll publish that soon. I'm a bit slow, but I'll get there. There's a lot of good info there, so I'm intending to use it to help me figure out where to put some more emphasis on more efforts on going forward. But we'll see. It'll take me easily another week or so before I can publish that. Today is also the feature freeze in the code project, or we're closing the feature window for new features for the next release. So starting today, we only accept bug fixes for 7.43.0. I did a pretty big merge of my HTTP2 multiplexing stuff the day before yesterday, I believe, and we're polishing out a few bugs that I introduced with that 45 commit merge. That because I wanted to get the multiplexing stuff into the branch done before this feature freeze, so we could get it in the next release. It still doesn't work properly, and I'm fighting doing many parallel uploads properly. Can't really figure out why, but I'm working on it. So send me your bug fixes or whatever. Of course, you can still work on feature stuff for curl, but we'll just hold them off until after this next release, until we merge them into the master branch at least. There's this awesome, really big patch that I haven't reviewed yet that introduces HTTPS connection to rather an HTTPS proxy. So you use TLS to the first proxy, which is a feature I've been wanting to add for a long time, and now I got this big patch to review. Awesome. So it'll be, if you speak HTTPS to the proxy and then HTTPS to the server, it'll be TLS through TLS and all those funny things. HTTP2 was then finally published as RFCs. I told you before the numbers. RFC 7540 and for the HTTP2 main spec, and the HPAC header compression, which is mandatory for HTTP2, is in the 7541 RFC. Awesome specs. Go read them. I wrote a blog post about the event. It was published on May 15th my time. Very early morning, I think, so I don't know exactly which is the official date. Maybe it's May 14th, because it was 14th, I believe, in the US when they published it. All right. I'm also working on an update then to the HTTP2 explain document that I'm working on. So if you have any final thoughts about what to add in that document, or just whatever you've been missing in it, tell me ASAP, and because I'm gonna make another release out like today or tomorrow. So basically, I've refreshed everything in it to refer to the RFC numbers and not speak about what is to come, blah blah blah, but more like HTTP2 is now actually done. I mean, the spec is there, so I need to kind of just change some wording and sentences and so on, and stop talking about drafts, but more like RFCs. And I've added a section about Quick, the Google Quick, the protocol, in the future section, as I get quite a few questions about Quick and how it relates to HTTP2 in the future and blah blah blah. So I've added some thoughts about it. I got a, well, I didn't get, but I was pointed out to a Chinese translation of HTTP2 Explain. So if you prefer reading it in Chinese, go to the site and you'll find a nice link to the Chinese version. So there's now a Russian version and there's a Chinese version. In other news then, also kind of related to the next curl release, but also to the current release, because HTTP2, you know, we use the library ng-HTTP2 in curl, and it's being used widely for a lot of other HTTP2 projects too. So they bumped their versions. They had they used to have the 0.7.15 version, which was the previous version, and they bumped to 1.0.0, and they made an API incompatible change, which means that the current curl release can't build with the latest ng-HTTP2 release then, but we're switching to the latest in our next curl release. But this, of course, causes some kind of confusions, because people who build HTTP2 stuff now, they tend to run with the latest ng-HTTP2 version, and they build with the latest release from curl, so they don't match right now. So if you want to have the latest curl release, you rather stick to a slightly older ng-HTTP2, or vice versa. If you go to the latest ng-HTTP2, you switch to the latest curl, which is done straight from Git right now, or a nightly snapshot. Anyway, that will be much easier in the 7.43.0 release, because then we're going to say you need version 1.0.0 or later of ng-HTTP2, and everything will be fine and dandy, I think. Of course, it'll create one of those new kind of requirements on all the distros, and all the distros will lag behind for a while and use the older ng-HTTP2. So, you know, my request from last week to see more distros with HTTP2 enabled curls, I think it'll take a while longer. I wanted to mention that I attended a talk, maybe I did mention, I don't remember, but I attended a talk about time by Patrick Fellström at the Google meetup here in Stockholm. It was an excellent subject. This is not really about curl or anything, it's about more geeky technical stuff and learning about how things work in real life. And it was a talk about the TAI time system, UT0, UT1, UTC, and the Swedish version of the UTC called UTC-SP, and how they all kind of relates, and what a leap second, why there are leap seconds, and what to do about them, and kind of how to synchronize time and so on. An excellent video and kind of a lecture on time on that kind of technical level that I really appreciate. So I think some of you might do that too. So go check it out. He's a great guy too, Patrick. So I got a suggestion that I think is fairly fun, that I'm going to kind of talk, address, comment, present some fun bug from the last week in this video. Maybe I could do it regularly if I have enough material that are fun enough or interesting enough to mention. So if you have any weekly bug to discuss, or really any bug or feature, whatever, tell me. That rather goes for the options too, you know, the curl command line options to explain or not. It struck me that when talking about curl options, you know, I think I mentioned a couple of short options, because in curl, as in most command line options or GNU utilities, or most command line options these days, I would say we have short options and we have long options. So you type short options with a single dash and a single letter, and you have long options that you type with two dashes and a long name. So you could type dash like this option I'm going to mention here today, how it works, like the -d option, which is a short option, which is the same then as the --data, which is the longer version of the same option. So you either type -d or you type --data. It is the same thing. But when you use the short version of the options, as in -d or whatever, I or V or capital I, or we have a lot of options, you can put them together next to each other. Like you could type $DVK all in kind of next to each other in the single word, and then they will be treated as individual options with just single dash and then all those single letter options stacked to each other, and it works. But then there are options like -d. -d takes a second following argument. So -d is about sending data in a HTTP post. So you type curl -d data, and that data would be whatever you want to send to the server. That could be name equals Daniel, or size equals 5, or whatever, blah blah blah, and then a URL, and then curl will send that as a post, HTTP post request to the site. So that's a single, even if you don't use that as a single letter option, in command line option, you still need the space after the D, or rather, you don't need a space. You can actually type the data in the same option, but since it's a single letter option with an extra argument, that extra argument will be read as kind of immediately after that D is parsed from the command line. So if you want to type 2 single letter options like -v, which is for verbose, it just shows more stuff, V and D, you can type them as -v and -d, or you can put them together, but after the D, the data has to come, the data to send has to come immediately following the D. So even if you have 2 singular options, it's important to, after a singular option that has an extra argument, you need to make sure that the extra argument follows immediately afterwards, which is a bit tricky. And then I could have also mentioned that a lot of those actually that goes for all options, a lot of the options that are kind of Boolean, that they switch on or they switch off stuff, like verbose, they switch on, and it doesn't matter if you switch on many times on the command line. You can type -v, it doesn't matter, it'll just switch on verbose multiple times. You can do that. There are a lot of tools when you can like add more V's to get more verbose level. So sometimes you see people use curl -vvv as in 3 V's, because there are some tools that use 3 V's to make it the most verbose level. It doesn't matter, because curl only has 1 level, on or off. Use 1 V, use 5 V's, it doesn't matter. And that also then goes for the same style for other options. So even if you're, for example, a favorite is the capital L option and the capital O options. They're for following locations and for saving stuff on the file. So you can actually type single -lol, as in uppercase lol. It's kind of a good old joke, because it's the same as LO or OL or whatever, but you can type lol if you want to. I could have also mentioned then, when speaking about this option parser is custom for curl, so we don't use any fancy command line parser library or other tools. So it's things in curl work generally roughly the same as other tools, but since we have our own parsing, there might be some initial minor quirks, or not initial, but minor differences in how it behaves. Generally, it doesn't matter. Generally, it just makes things easier to do it our own way. So anyway, since I mentioned these are kind of Boolean options when you switch things on, we also have the kind of the reverse, and you can switch off all these Boolean things. Verbose level on, yeah, but how do you say verbose level off? And you do that in the generic case. We have the parser then understands a no prefix on the long version of the name. So in the dash verbose, switch on verbose, you can then type dash no dash verbose to switch on. No, sorry, to switch off verbose. I'm confusing myself here. So whatever it is you enable with dash blah blah, you disable with dash no dash blah blah. It's as simple as that. But this doesn't sound simple because I've been talking about this forever now. I wanted to mention then, going back, that I talking about command line options for a curl. I decided I would do a fun randomization function to get the options in random order instead of getting them from the top from the man page. And here is how I did it. Just a single command line with the awesome sort dash capital R option. So this is the list of options I'm going to talk about today. I want to talk about dash D, which is the one I already mentioned, is HTTP post. You add whatever stuff you want to send to the server. If you add many dash D and data, they will all be merged with a ampersand in between, because that's how you usually do it when you send pieces of data in HTTP post. It doesn't encode anything, so if you whatever you type on the command line, it'll send it. It is important if you want to send it to a server, for example, in a HTTP case. The server often assumes that the data is encoded, URI encoded or whatever, and if dash D doesn't do that, so you can then of course trick the server to do whatever fun stuff, but encode it. So, and since I'm running long, I'll just mention one other option today, and that is the very obscure TLS --TLS user option. Probably almost never ever used by anyone in the world, but TLS user is about setting the username when doing TLS based authentication, which is different than other authentications because it is in the TLS layer of communication. So it actually has a notion of that, which is very, very rarely used and only in particular use cases and setups. So, and because then you can send, like, use a password for the TLS layer, or secure passwords or whatever. So the weekly bug then to mention. Issue number 275, we got this report. It turns out that if you build curl against a bleeding edge boring SSL, it doesn't work. And you know how, yeah, that's the kind of the life with bleeding edge code, as I just mentioned in GHP2, but also now boring SSL. And as we read now that the Android open source project, that means Android in general, they are switching to boring SSL instead of OpenSSL. So maybe the boring SSL stuff might become more interesting to more people. In the curl poll, we saw that a whopping 0.3% of our users use boring SSL. So maybe this problem doesn't hurt that many people. But anyway, the fun stuff with this broken boring SSL build was that, well, first it was said in the commit that kind of broke it in the boring SSL project. They said that this commit adds a new preprocessor compatibility section to avoid breaking if-defs. So in order to avoid breaking if-defs, they broke our stuff, so we added if-defs. But it turned out that we actually could solve it without if-defs, so we could actually change it to another API that still works in boring SSL and works even with older OpenSSL too. So we could actually make it more nice in general. It was just kind of ironic that how everything turned out. And we got a good communication with a Chromium guy on Twitter that helped us out really fast on that. That was great. That was it about my stuff this week. Interesting week. I have not really succeeded in doing multiple parallel uploads, multiplexed HTTP2. I have this weird bug. I told you like 15 minutes ago. Hopefully I'll have better news next week. I got a question about what role I see HTTP2 play in future command line curl. And I would say that curl, when it comes to HTTP2, is not going to be. I don't think it's going to be widely popular at the beginning, because for regular API and REST stuff, HTTP2 is not going to revolutionize anything. But I think that curl is so far, curl's life in HTTP2 land has been an excellent tool to debug stuff and exercise your server end or whatever, trying out HTTP2 stuff that isn't that easy to debug and play around with your browser, but it makes it easy to do it with curl. And then I think we'll see more stuff switching to HTTP2. And then in the long run, I want to allow the curl tool then to do full multiplexing as well, so you could do request many resources over the same connection like any other thing would do over HTTP2. So I think as HTTP2 is going to grow in popularity, I think we'll see more use cases and more use of curl in HTTP2. But of course that assumes that some distros start to actually make curl HTTP2 able in their versions of curl. I'm going to say goodbye for now. Very long episode. I'll shut up. Bye.